Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. Today we are going to be taking a look at the Chicago Blackhawks. The Blackhawks had a good draft and they also had a good free agency. Now they didn't go and start pulling away superstar talent. They didn't grab Stamkos. They didn't grab any of the huge big name free agents like Gensel. But they had themselves a really good free agency, and we're going to discuss why in today's video. So let's start off with the draft. Now, obviously, having the second overall pick, there was a little bit of question who they would go with. Would they go with someone like Ivan Demidov? Would they go with Artem Levshinov? They ended up going defense, and that was kind of interesting because we know how good their defense is already with guys like Kevin Korchinski, Ethan Del Maestro. Did they need to add another player? They figured they did. So they add from the Michigan State Spartans, Artem Levshinov. He ends up being the first defenseman picked off the board. Really good pickup there for the Blackhawks. We'll discuss that more once we get into next season. I think that was a great pickup, though, for the Blackhawks. Going into free agency, the focus seemed to be more on getting depth to this team and culture. Culture is always talked about in the National Hockey League, but it's always the easy answer. It's always, we're trying to build a good culture here. We're trying to do this. But certain teams are better at it than others. And when you see it, you know what it is when you see it. And, I think of a good example of the opposite of that. The Edmonton Oilers in the mid-2000s, early 2010s. They were a team full of first overall players, but there was no sense of leadership or that veteran camaraderie to build that team. So you could have as many first overall picks as you want, but if you don't have those veterans to kind of teach the young guys the ropes of the league and to grow and develop, that is what ultimately ends up happening. And I think for the Blackhawks, they obviously have been rebuilding the last couple of years. So some of these additions aren't superstar players. They're not former first overall picks or anything like that. But they're guys that are going to add to the culture to help bring along some of the younger players in this organization and turn them into legit NHL superstars. So the first name, one of the bigger names off the board for the Blackhawks, was forward Tyler Bertuzzi. He comes over from Toronto. This was a really good addition for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's kind of on a prove-it deal. Now, it's a longer-term deal at 4 years, but this is a guy that maybe kind of regressed this season and kind of disappointed Leaf fans with what he actually produced in Toronto. I think he's going to expect more from himself this season. He's going to get more ice time this year, which I think will be a benefit playing with the Blackhawks. And I think he has to get back more to his game, kind of being an asshole. And I think that's his style of play. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Tyler Bertuzzi thrives in that role. He's going to be a better player for the Blackhawks when he's there doing that. So we'll see how that goes. It's a 4-year deal, $5.5 million per season. I think that's a good contract. It's a conservative contract, some stability and some term for Bertuzzi, but also not at a cap hit, especially as the salary cap continues to go up. This is a pretty safe deal overall. Now the next contract is also a pretty safe deal overall. It's a 1-year deal, $1.3 million to forward Patrick Maroon. You're seeing a theme here, right, with the first two players off the board for the Blackhawks. Patrick Maroon also played alongside Tyler Bertuzzi back in the day. They both played for the Bruins a couple years ago. Pat Maroon, he's been around, right? He won some cups with Tampa, with St. Louis. He has been around the block. He spent last year with the Bruins playing really well. He's played for the Minnesota Wild. He's played all over the place. But Pat Maroon is going to find himself in Chicago next season. He knows what he's there for. He's a locker room guy. He might not be playing all 82 games in next season, but that's okay. He's there with some depth. He's going to add some size and speed. Well, speed is one thing. Size and grit to that bottom six for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's not going to be scoring 20, 30 goals next season, but like I said, he's getting paid to be there as a presence for this team, as hoping to keep this team from getting pushed around. And I think Tyler Bertuzzi is going to do that as well, just on a maybe more consistent basis than a guy like Maroon, who, like I said, probably won't see all 82 games next year. Also looking at Joey Anderson coming in, a 2-year deal, $800K, another forward. Joey Anderson's also been around the league a little bit. His most recent stint in Chicago. He played a lot in the bottom six. I expect him to fill out a similar role with the Blackhawks. I think he was acquired in a trade, if I'm not mistaken, from Toronto a few years ago. So it's cool. It's nice to see him coming back to Chicago. Laurent Brossoit. This is a huge one for the Blackhawks. They finally get a little bit more stability in between the pipes. It's a 2-year deal, $3.3 million per season. Brossoit went back to Winnipeg last year. He's been all over the place. He was in Winnipeg. He was in Vegas. He was in Edmonton for a little bit. So he signs a 2-year deal, keeping him in Chicago. I like this a lot. He's going to hopefully refine his game there. But he's going to see a lot of rubber next season in Chicago. So Brossoit, he's going to be getting his licks in. So hopefully he's going to be ready for next season. As the Blackhawks kind of continue to go in the upward trajectory, they're hoping a little bit more stability in between the pipes. With a guy like Laurent Brossoit, can hopefully help with that. Craig Smith comes in, 1-year deal, $1 million. He most recently spent time with the Dallas Stars, but he's been in Nashville, where he spent a couple of seasons in Nashville. He's been all over the place, but I think this is another great addition, once again, to the Blackhawks, as Craig Smith, kind of along the lines of some of these other guys like Maroon and Bertuzzi. He's been around the block. He's in his late 30s. He's another veteran presence to add some glue to that locker room, add to that team in more ways than just scoring and production. So, love this addition by the Blackhawks. Alec Martinez signs a 1-year deal, $4 million cap hit. He won the Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights last season. He's a pretty good top 4 defenseman. I think this is a good pickup here for the Blackhawks. Going to add some stability to that blue line. Could be playing minutes alongside maybe some of the younger defensemen like Korchinski or Ethan Del Maestro next season, depending on what they do with Artem Levshinov, maybe even playing alongside Levshinov. He does have some injury issues, so hopefully Martinez is able to recover this summer and he'll be ready to go next season, but that's probably why he only got a 1-year deal, is that injury history has not been too kind for him recently. So hopefully Martinez will be healthy, have another good season, and I think he knows where he is right now in his career. He's got his cup. He's probably going to be more of a mentor at this point. And don't forget, he did win a Stanley Cup. He was the reason that the Los Angeles Kings won those 2 cups in 3 years back in the mid-2010s. So Alec Martinez is officially a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. And then to wrap up this video, they added another defenseman here to end off free agency, signing defenseman TJ Brodie to a 2-year contract, $3.75 million per season. This is a guy with a chip on his shoulder. He got bought out from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Actually, I'm not sure if it was a buyout. It might have been a buyout. Either it was a buyout or his contract ended. But I'm pretty sure he was bought out. Let me know down below for certain. But he ends up going to the Blackhawks, a 2-year deal. And like I said, this is a contract that's pretty safe for the Blackhawks. It's 2 years, so worst case, they bury that contract next season if he can't play. And if he can play, great. They have some more depth on the blue line. Kind of along the lines of Martinez, another veteran presence on the blue line to play with some of, he'll probably be paired with one of the younger defensemen in the Blackhawks organization. And he's pretty reliable. I know a lot of Leaf fans did not like him, especially at the end of his time in Toronto. But this is a guy that looking to end his career on a good note. He's going to get some playing time in Chicago next season, and he's getting paid pretty handsomely considering. So I think this is a pretty good contract for himself. It's a pretty good contract for the Blackhawks. Like I said, it's a safe contract, and I think that's what the Blackhawks' main theme of free agency was this year, is getting some veterans to this team. You know what you're getting. Yeah, they might not be able to play all 82 games, but that's where the younger guys in the lineup come in, and they're going to play more minutes when these guys might not be healthy. So it's not the worst thing in the world if they're healthy or not. Short-term deals, pretty safe contracts. The number for each season isn't relatively high. It still gives the Blackhawks some flexibility. And like I said, overall, I think it was a pretty solid free agency for the Blackhawks, despite not bringing back Patrick Kane and maybe going after some of those guys like a Gensel. You still look at some of the other additions. They brought back a guy like Teuvo Teravainen, who I almost forgot here. It's nice to see him coming back to Chicago. A 3-year deal, $5.4 million per season. I know that was one that a lot of Blackhawks fans were upset when he left the organization. So I think it's a nice thing to see him coming back to Chicago. There's a reason when you see guys, I think that's a huge compliment to the franchise and the organization. When you see guys leave a team and then really in his case, they got traded from the team and then deciding to come back in free agency. That tells you a lot about that organization, because guys have all the luxury in the world to pick wherever they want to go, basically, especially a guy like Teravainen. and he chose to go back to Chicago. So maybe some of that's the nostalgia. His early years as a rookie and winning a Stanley Cup in Chicago might have had some influence on that, but I think there's a reason he wanted to come back to the Blackhawks, and he's going to probably be playing alongside Connor Bedard next season, which I think that's a pretty good selling point to have you come back. He spent some really good seasons in Carolina, but his minutes over the time in Carolina kind of diminished as the Hurricanes are going in a different direction, and their team's continuing to get a little bit more bolstered. And I think this is a good move here for the Blackhawks, bringing him into the fold. Definitely going to add some scoring for next season, which we saw from last year desperately needed. And I think for the Blackhawks addressing some of the key issues that were wrong with this team, yeah, they're not going to probably be making the playoffs next season, but they're going to be a lot better next season. And, I think even with Brossoit, there's still some goalie issues. The defense is going to be very young. And, as much as I like Martinez and Brody, those weren't seen as necessarily the better defensemen on their teams. So that's going to continue to be an issue. But like I said, that's where the development of this team, this is the growing pains. And we're going to see some of that from the Blackhawks this season. And we'll talk about that more once we get into the beginning of next season as we head into training camp, looking at some of the guys like Korchinski, Del Maestro, and potentially even Lev Shinov, depending on where he ends up next season, if he goes back to school to play at Michigan State, or if he decides to join the Blackhawks and playing in the NHL. I don't see him going to rock the AHL next season. I think it's going to be one of those things where he either plays in the NHL or he's going back to the Big Ten. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of the Blackhawks? Did they have a good free agency or not? And did you like their pickup of Lev Shinov at the draft? Let me know all your thoughts on that. Guys, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you again next time.